As you can see, I'm not in my office. The bookshelf's not behind me. I don't have that plaid shirt on, green and brown shirt, or my black vest anymore. After doing those 14 videos, you're probably tired of seeing me in that getup. I'm not even in Pennsylvania. I'm way down south in Florida, and here it's so nice, the environment, it's beautiful. I can wear short sleeve shirt because of the fact it's 70 degrees out there, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, obviously. And I did a number of weeks ago I put a new video up saying that I'm going to be looking at Mecca and debunking these claims by Muslims and others that Mecca existed prior to the 7th century. Remember, we don't have any reference to Mecca on any documents at all until 741 AD. Muhammad died in 632, 741 is over 100 years later. Yet it is the Islamic traditions that say clearly that Mecca is where Muhammad was born in 570, is where he lived until 622 when he moved then up to Medina. It was the center of trade. The traditions do refer to that. You have so many references in the traditions, in the 9th and 10th century traditions, about Mecca. You need Mecca because the Quran itself suggests that it is the city. Well, it doesn't ever use the name Mecca. It just says in chapter 7, verse 24, that Adam and Eve, there up in a Garden of Eden, were sent down to earth. It's all it says is to earth. It's the traditions that say that was to Mecca where they were sent to. In chapter 21 of the Quran, verses 51 to 71, we do have that injunction that refers to the fact that Abraham, this is the 1900 BC in this case, so 1900 BC, Abraham was there. It doesn't say Mecca again, it just says he was where the Kaaba was or where the Masjid al-Haram was, and that's why people assume that that's Abraham there in Mecca. These are all assumptions, and the traditions are the ones that really solidify that by stipulating Abraham was there, Adam and Eve were there. Therefore, it's the oldest city in history, Abraham, 1900 BC, one of the oldest cities around. And then, of course, you have Montgomery coming around in the 1800s who said this was the center of the trade, north, south, east, and west, and that's why it became so strong and so powerful. So the traditions, along with Western historians, have always assumed Mecca did exist, and this has been the narrative. What I want to do is debunk most of that, and one of the things I want to do, in fact, I want to debunk all of it, because I want to suggest that there are problems with every one of these. The first problem, of course, is that traditions are so late, and so how is it and why is it we're even trusting them when we see that they've got wrong, so many things wrong on so many other areas? But let's go to Mecca. What about Mecca? And I want to go through a number of these. I want to go through, the first one is this one by Diodorus Siculus. Now, Diodorus Siculus was born in 91 BC up to 30 BC. And this is the one that Muslims are always pushing forward. And they are the ones that are saying that Mecca is referred to by Diodorus Siculus in a phrase where he says, and I'll read it in Greek. He was a Greek historian back in the 1st century BC, and he said, Hieron, hagiōtaton, hidrutai, timōmenon, hupo. Excuse me for my Greek, I know I'm desecrating it. Pantōn, Arabōn, perittoteron. Now that means, it's translated, a very sacred temple has been established there, which is highly revered by all the Arabs. That's really all that Diodorus Siculus is talking about. This was picked up in the 1800s and the 19th century by Edward Gibbon, who wrote in 1788, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. In volume 5, he refers to this one reference, this one statement by Diodorus Siculus and say, that must be Mecca. Why? Well, it's a temple that was established and all the Arabs knew it. What could that be other than Mecca? Because we all know that Mecca was known by all the Arabs, and it was, okay, so it wasn't a mosque, it was a temple, but that's what the name was in those days. And because of that, Muslims have flocked to that. Everybody has flocked to that. and everybody needs to be careful. Now, I went back and I looked at a great website put on out by Ian D. Morris. I want to thank Ian D. Morris for what he has done. He has gone back and he's debunked every one of these references to Mecca. So I'm going to take and unpack what he says and add a little bit to it to show you that in every case, these are not Mecca. This is not Mecca. Because if you're going to quote Diodorus Siculus, why don't you go and see who he is quoting? Look and see who he is quoting. Now, to give a little background, we need to give a little history lesson. And we need to go back to the 3rd century BC. We need to go to the king of Egypt, who is known as Ptolemy II of Philadelphus. He was the king of Egypt. He wanted to go and conquer that part. He wanted to conquer the Gulf of Aqaba. And so he was going to go down, and before he did so, like a good king, he sent a fellow named Arabōn to go and check it out, to suss it out, as we say in England, to go and see what kind of terrain it is, whether or not there's a lot of mountains, whether they can go by boat, whether they can go by land. This is typical. Before you do a great conquest, you want to make sure where you're going. You want to make sure you can get your army there. And this is what was the responsibility of Arabōn. Now, we don't have Arabōn's report. What we do have is a geographer from the 2nd century BC, and his name is Agatharchides. Agatharchides, what a name. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly for those who speak Greek. Agatharchides is the one that actually then takes what Arabōn has reported and then puts it into his work himself, his seminal work, which is called On the Red Sea. And here's a picture of On the Red Sea. And what's fascinating, there have been 3 others who then took what Agatharchides said. One is the Bibliotheca Historia of Diodorus Siculus, which we're referring to, who wrote in the 1st century BC. Another is the Geographica of Strabo, who wrote in, again, the 1st century BC. And then the Bibliotheca of Photius, who wrote in the 9th century AD. And it's those 3 that most people go to find out what happened. But they normally just go to Diodorus and they just go to this one sentence that comes from Agatharchides. Now, listen, folks, if you're just going to go to one sentence, you need to go back to the original source. That's what we've always said. Remember, this whole thing that we've had, the Muslim after Muslim who's quoting the 9th and 10th century and always quoting them for everything that's happening in the 7th century. And my biggest problem with that is, why in the world are we listening to the 9th and 10th century? Let's go back to the 7th century, go back to the source, go back to the origin, go back to the time when the history took place, go back when these people were actually doing what they were doing in that place at that time. And this is the same problem again. Why did Gibbon go to Diodorus? Why didn't he go right back to Agatharchides? Why didn't he go back to see what he said? Because Agatharchides actually explained what this Arabōn found. And this is what he says. And he talks about the Gulf of Aqaba, and he talks about a bay. Now, he doesn't call it the Gulf of Aqaba. He calls it the Kolpas. Somewhere south, but it's south of what is today the Gulf of Aqaba, that runs inland, and he talks about the many different islands that are there. So you can look at a map. Let's put a map up here and you'll see what we're talking about. Let's look at the Gulf of Aqaba. Look and see the isthmus. Look and see where it comes out at the very southern end, and look and see all those islands there. Specifically, look at the island of Tiran, the Tiran Island. So Agatharchides, let me get it correct. It's hard to say. Listen, folks, this is not easy. It's hard to read. These names are that long, and you have to get it just right. Otherwise, I'm going to get a lot of people on my case. He says that it's a bay or gulf somewhere south of this Gulf of Aqaba that runs inland about 500 stadia. Now, they would always give their measurements by stadia. How long is stadia? That's the stadia is where you have the stadia is where you have the games. It's where you have many of the sports. And so the stadia was a measured size. And so 500 stadia would be about 90 kilometers today. 90 kilometers. So go about 90 kilometers. The mouth is too craggy for ships to traverse. You can see with all these islands there. Around the bay live a hunting people calling themselves like the Batmizomenes or Banizomenes. A very sacred temple has been established there, which is highly revered by all Arabs. And that's that last phrase that Diodorus has picked up, which then our good friend Edward Gibbon has picked up and said, that must be Mecca. That must be Mecca. Now notice, Diodorus doesn't say this is Mecca. Agatharchides never says this is Mecca. They never mention that once. What do they say? Well, they say that this place where this temple is just 90 kilometers south of, really, what we're looking at is south of the Hieron Island. So let's look at a map and let's see what is south of the Hieron Island. And what you get is the Wadi Ayuna. It's the Wadi Ayuna. That is what he's talking about. The Wadi Ayuna, take a look at it on the map, is just inland. There is a temple there. There was a temple there in the 3rd century BC. That is what Diodorus is referring to. That is what is Agatharchides is referring to. And that's why Gibbon got it wrong, because he wasn't thinking through that there was nothing further south than that. Remember, back in the 2nd, 3rd century BC, there was no Mecca. In fact, not anybody really went that far south from the Roman era or the Greek era, because there was nothing really happening down there. As we now know, everything was happening up north, in Thamud, around the Nabateans, further east, over in what is today Baghdad, used to be Ctesiphon. What is today Kufa used to be Hira. That's where everything was happening. And so when it says, or when Agatharchides says a very sacred temple has been established there, where is there? Well, which was revered by all the Arabs, he's referring to the fact that all the Arabs in his experience, all the Arabs in his time. So what Arabs were there? Well, we do know that there are references to Tabuk, and there's references to Khaybar, and there's references to Medina Sali. There, you can see them on the map. These are all further north. They're much further north. They're in what is the Nabatean area, and that's why these are well known. These cities are part of the pantheon of cities that were well known, because this is from the land of Edom and also the Nabateans. What's fascinating, if Gibbon had gone to Agatharchides, or even if he had gone and studied a little bit more at Diodorus, he would have asked a better question. He should have asked them, why is it that these men who were down in that area, when Agatharchides has gone down, in fact, we know Strabo actually traveled way down south. Why is it that none of them ever mentioned Mecca? Why is it they never mention a mosque, or the city, or the Kaaba? Why is it they never mention this? They mention this temple, which is much further north. How much further north? Let's look at another map. Take a look, and let's show. This is the map now that shows you all the cities. Take a look at how many kilometers we're talking about. 962 kilometers between Wadi Ainuna, where this temple would have been, and Mecca today. That's almost 1,000 kilometers, folks. So when Diodorus, who's quoting Agatharchides, what Diodorus is referring to this, all the Arabs up that area would have known about this temple. It was a large temple. It was not a mosque. It was not a masjid al-haram, which is what you have in the Quran in chapter 2, which refers to the Kaaba that we have today. In fact, the Arabic didn't even exist that early, so they would have not even had that kind of word. And so you can see that this is a much further north environment, a much further north temple. And that's why Gibbon and any Muslim that wants to claim Diodorus is talking about Mecca has a number of problems. First and foremost, he's got the problem of going to the wrong source. You don't start with Diodorus, you start with Agatharchides. And then you go and see what is it that he said fully. And he gives and he shows it. He says it's just 500 stadia away from all these islands, especially the Hieron Island, which puts it right there, smack off the coast, just a little bit up the coast from what we know as today as Wadi Ayuna. Still there today, the Wadi is. The temple is no longer there because it was destroyed in the 2nd or 1st century BC. Now, to suggest that this could have been Mecca is not only got the wrong place, it's got the wrong environment, it's got the wrong time, and it's got the wrong reference point, because it's assuming all Arabs would have known it. Only Arabs in the north would have known it, because Arabs were not that far south. There were not Arabs that they would have known about. The Arabs that they're talking about are the Nabatean Arabs, who are all over what we now know today as Jordan and the northern part of Arabia and parts of even Iraq and parts of Syria. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Look at all the maps. I hope that's giving you the information. This is the first one we're debunking. We'll go into some more after this. So this is Jay here in Florida. Over and out.